Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On guard, please prepare to post the colors. On guard, post the colors. On guard, dismissed. The audience may be seated.
Thank you very much. And if you'd like to come to the mic and identify your troop and give us your names and the schools you attend.
We're from Troop 321 here in San Carlos. I'm William Jury. I go to Bellarmine.
I'm Will Klein, and I go to Sequoia High School, and I just got my Eagle.
I'm Morgan Donovan. I go to Carmont.
I'm Arthur Anderson, and I go to Carmont.
Thank you, gentlemen. Item 2 on our agenda is changes to the order of the agenda. Do we have any changes recommended by staff?
No changes to the order, but we would like to pull item 8H and continue it to the next meeting.
Item 8H on the consent calendar?
Consent calendar, that's
Okay.
correct.
And that would be continued to our July
4th meeting.
24th meeting. Okay. Thank you. That, for the audience sake, that's our parking ordinance that we discussed at, I believe, at our last council meeting. Is that it? And council, any changes? None? That takes us to item 3, which is report from closed session. City Attorney Bob Lanzone.
The council has nothing to report from closed session.
Okay, thank you very much. And item 4 is council communications and announcements. Why don't we start with Vice Mayor Davids?
I have none.
Councilmember Grisili?
I have none.
And Councilmember Teagle Doherty?
Nope.
None. Okay. I have a few items, and then I've asked Barry to present an item, if he would. I did want to recognize, I believe it was the Vineyard Church had some folks out on Laurel Street this past week cleaning the 6, 7, and 800 blocks of Laurel Street, and wanted to recognize that effort on their part and thank them in their efforts. And then lastly, something that we will see on our agenda, I think, for the next council meeting is from the Airport Roundtable. We are, it seems, finally going to be receiving our noise monitor that was talked about 2 years ago, I think. And we will see something on the agenda for that on July 24th, I believe, is our next meeting. And that concludes my report, except I did have an item here that I've asked our Parks and Rec Director, Barry Weiss, to present.
Mayor Grocott and members of the City Council, you have before you a request from Mayor Grocott to conduct a family fun bicycle ride, and this ride would be done to raise funds for our adopted city of Pass Christian, Mississippi, which is still recovering from the devastation from Hurricane Katrina. This event, we had a planning session this morning. This event was talked about could even become an annual event. This year certainly would feature pedaling for Pass, would be the tagline to raise money for Pass Christian. Because we're so early in the process, we do not have a lot of detailed fiscal information for you. After talking to a couple of other department heads in Public Works and Police who would be heavily involved with Parks and Recreation, we think that we can probably spend not over $1,000 on staff costs. And a lot of that would happen during regular shifts and stuff. Some police overtime and some Parks and Recreation overtime would be in there. We're working very closely with the Chamber of Commerce as well as the San Carlos Pass Christian Hurricane Relief Committee, or for short, the Pass Christian Committee. And they've already talked about a lot of different things, of donations they could get and tasks that they will perform. The route is described, a tentative route is described in the report. That is subject to change, as it says here. Both Public Works and police are reviewing that, looking for changes to the route that would make it even safer, to really focus on streets with the bike routes, with the bicycle lanes, to make it safer. We would most likely have the ride, it'll be a family ride. The mayor has volunteered to lead it. One of the Pass Christian Committee members would be what's called the sweeper and follow behind to keep control, and two of us would ride with the route to, kind of shepherd the people along. But technically they wouldn't need us because they would follow all traffic laws. Wait for the stop signs, wait for the stop lights, stay on the right side of the street, et cetera, just like if you were out riding yourself. We would start and end at Loyola Park, and I talked to police, and they'd be interested in doing some helmet safety. They also have a giveaway program for people who can't afford helmets, and Parks and Recreation would do something along the lines of health and wellness, because this is certainly a health and wellness event. The rest of the information is in the report. At this point, I or the mayor would be happy to take any questions you have.
Okay, any questions for either Barry or myself?
I actually had a couple. Thanks for clarifying the staff cost as well. I think this is a great idea, a wonderful way to sort of build community. Have we gotten any feedback or comments as it relates to it being discriminatory against people with disabilities, or using staff time for people who may not be able to participate because of their inabilities to ride a bike? Or are we proposing some alternatives of walking or jogging or anything like that?
We're not. We're making it a bicycle ride. We would do anything we could to accommodate anybody with disability if they have a specially adapted bicycle, which I know are out there.
Yeah.
And we would just make that accommodation to include everybody, because we certainly want to be inclusive in all this.
Absolutely. And then I noticed here that the Chamber of Commerce, their involvement couldn't be confirmed as of staff report. However, it has been confirmed at this time?
Their participation is confirmed. Whether they're quote-unquote the lead agency, it's really going to be a cooperative effort between.
Okay, so that in terms of the raising of the funds, that would all go through the chamber?
Right. All the pledges and any donations that came along with it would go to the chamber, which is the current process. Any donations to Pass Christian goes to the chamber. Chamber then gives it to the city, and we put it into a restricted account, and we write the check. But they are the ones for collecting it and passing it along to us.
And that will be done through the Parks and Rec Department? Or can they do it
right.
online?
They give us the money, and we give it to finance, and it goes to a restricted account.
Would they be able to do it online, like the same way that they sign up for Parks and Rec classes and stuff like that?
Quite honestly, we're not that far along in the planning. It's so much in the beginning stages, we hadn't thought about that.
Okay. The only other comment that I will make is, since I live on Eaton, Eaton is not a great bike riding street because it's so narrow and windy. I would recommending substituting St. Francis, because it is a lot wider than Eaton, and there's room for parked cars as well as a unmarked bicycle lane and traffic all sharing the same road. But Eaton is,
Great.
I would say, strike that one really quickly.
Great minds think alike. City Manager Mark Weiss and I were talking about the possibility of St. Francis today, and I know I've had a brief conversation with Parviz Mukhtari, the Public Works Director, and Rich Sinfio, the Acting Police Chief, and we're going to look at it and pick out the best routes. The route is not that important, just a route for the
Oh,
event.
agreed. And it's more, I mean, like I said, I live on Eaton, and it's frightening enough with bicyclists actually up on the sidewalks where the cars are parked also.
We agree.
So, okay.
Any further questions?
I think it's a great idea, and would support it wholeheartedly.
I concur.
Okay. Mr. Weiss, do we need a vote on this, or is consensus enough to move forward?
I think that there are resources available if we keep it to the $1,000 area, that there are monies available within our budget for bringing this program forward. So if there's consensus with the council, we will move it forward as a program.
Very good. Thank you very much. And council, I thank you for the support. That brings us on our agenda to item 5, which is reports to council. And that would be staff reporting to council. Do we have anything there? Or there's nothing on the agenda
We
you have
have not.
marked, but
We have nothing in addition.
nothing in addition. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on from there to item 6, which is presentations, and a presentation of proclamation to William Klein of Troop 321 upon receiving his Eagle Scout Award. Do you want to meet me at the podium? Hello, Mr. Klein. How are you?
Good, how are you?
This is a presentation to you, a proclamation from the city acknowledging your work on your Eagle project, and I thought I'd give you a moment to explain what your project was. Tell us about it, if you would.
All right. Well, first of all, I started my project and it was at Sequoia High School on the baseball field. Since I go to Sequoia and I see the baseball field every day, I noticed that it needed new bullpens, practice pitching mounds on both sides of the field, so I decided to ask the coach if he wanted me to help out with that, and he was all for it. So I rebuilt the bullpen mounds and cleaned up the field. So, and yeah.
Did the coach like it?
Yeah,
Very
yeah, he likes it a lot actually, because it actually looks a lot better now than it did before.
Well, I noticed here you have William Gregory. Which name do you go by?
Will
Will?
or
Will?
William? Yeah.
Well, Will, on the behalf of the city of San Carlos, thank you for your service to the community.
Thank
And we
you.
certainly wish you all the luck in the world.
Thanks.
Thank you. And thanks for leading the pledge tonight, too. We appreciate that. That brings us to item 7, which is public comment, 10 minutes maximum and 2 minutes per speaker. If we have anyone from the public who would like to address the council on an item which is not on the posted agenda, now is the time to do so. And seeing no speakers, we will move on from that item. We're going way too fast, aren't we, Mr. Grisilli? Okay, that brings us to item 8, which is approval of the consent calendar, keeping in mind that item H has been continued for our next council meeting. So we are looking at items A through G and I, J, and K on the consent calendar. These items will be considered by or enacted by one motion unless anyone from staff, or council, or the public would like to have an item considered separately, in which case it would be put under new business. Do we have anybody who would like to pull any item? Okay, seeing none, I would consider a motion for all items except for item H.
I would move approval of consent calendar items 8A through G, 8I, which is adoption of ordinance number 1375, setting sanitary sewer rates for all user categories for fiscal years 2006 through 2009. 8J, K, I guess that's it, 8J and K.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, the motion was by Councilmember Doherty for all the items stated. Second was by Vice Mayor Davids. Roll call.
Councilmember Teagle Doherty?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis is absent. Mayor Grocott?
Yes. That brings us to a public hearing, item 9. 9A is consideration of abandoning a 5-foot wide strip of public right-of-way on the westerly side of the 600 block of Park Avenue. And this item will be presented to us by our city engineer, Parviz Mukhtari.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is sort of has become routine, if you will, and I'll try to answer any questions you may have on either item 9A or 9B.
Are there any questions for our city engineer? Hearing none. Do we have any speakers on this item? This is a public hearing. And seeing none, I would consider a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
All those in favor is fine.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
in favor? Aye. None opposed? We had no questions on that. I would consider then a motion for
I would move
Approval on 9A and
abandonment,
9B.
approval of abandonment of a 9-foot strip public right-of-way along the westerly side of 600 block of Park Avenue, as well as approval of the abandonment of a variable width strip of public right-of-way along 2600 block of Graceland Avenue. I can do them both in one motion, right?
Through
Or do you
the
need two?
chair, do we need a separate public hearing for 9A and 9B?
Okay, I'm sorry. So then I withdraw that motion, and I would move approval of the abandonment of a 5-foot public-wide strip of public right-of-way on the westerly side of 600 block of Park Avenue.
Second.
roll call, please.
Councilmember Teagle Doherty.
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli.
Yes.
Councilmember Davids.
Yes.
Mayor Grocott.
Yes. So now we have, Mr. City Attorney, we have a public hearing on item 9B. All right, are there any questions on item 9B? Anyone from the public who would like to have questions on 9B?
Just for clarification, this is a public hearing for the consideration of abandonment of a variable width strip of public right-of-way along 2600 block of Graceland.
Thank you. Seeing no members of the public, I would,
Move to close the public hearing.
there we go.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none.
I would
on
further
to-
move abandonment of approval of the abandonment of a variable strip of public right-of-way along 2600 block of Graceland.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Doherty and seconded by Vice Mayor Davids. Roll call.
Councilmember Teagle Doherty.
Yes.
Councilmember Davids.
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli.
Yes.
Mayor Grocott.
Yes. Thank you very much, and thank you, Inga, for carrying that along. That brings us to item 10A, which is discussion of proposed fire services assessment and direction to staff. And I think this will be presented to us by Assistant City Manager Brian Mora.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. You'll probably recall this item was before you in June on a conceptual basis to discuss the proposal of the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department Board to propose a fire services assessment in each of the two communities. The current schedule calls for the San Carlos City Council to take final action on its proposed fire service assessment at the July 24th council meeting 2 weeks from today. Since we did have a discussion of this item at the last fire department board meeting on June 30th, we thought it appropriate at the staff level to bring this item to you tonight so that you could have some more in-depth discussion of the topic and also to provide any direction either to staff or to your two fire board representatives. So the report that you see in front of you tonight does have an outline of the fire services assessment, and I won't go through it again since we did a previous report. I'll call your attention to the table on page 3 that outlines the 6 services that are proposed to be funded by the fire services assessment, namely the cross-staff truck service, the retiree medical costs over 20 years, the replacement fund for 4 fire engines, the building replacement fund, the 10% operating reserve fund, and the light vehicle equipment replacement fund. The assessment also proposes to pay for a portion of the costs that are incurred when we move from a 50-50 funding formula to a 53-47 formula. That occurs if both cities pass a revenue measure such as this. I also handed out to you tonight a updated spreadsheet that you also see on the video projector here, and that is based on the numbers we received late Friday from Muni Financial Services. This is the company that was retained by the fire department to do the assessment analysis for both communities. And what you see in these revised sheets is that the revenue raised by the assessment levels recommended by your 2 fire board representatives, Mayor Grocott and Councilmember Grisilli, is slightly higher than we had been told on June 30th. It raises a net amount of $1,206,000. And so it does fully fund the 6 items that you saw in the staff report, as we previously reported. Also, it does increase the amount of money that is available to the city to cover the increase in the funding formula from roughly $96,000 to now $150,000. It still leaves a significant gap, as you'll see on the spreadsheet here, but it does take us a little bit closer to the dollar amount. What we would suggest tonight is that you discuss the concept of the fire assessment, and also that what you it would be helpful is to hear your comments on the various items that are recommended for funding, and also the assessment levels. And then once we have your final, or I shouldn't say your final, but your direction tonight on that, then we can continue to work with the consultants at Muni Financial and also our special legal counsel, Joan Kassman, to prepare the final documents for you. The process is that on the 24th, you would adopt a resolution of intent to pass, and if the council did pass that, that would trigger the election. You would also adopt a final version of the assessment report. And so those are the 2 documents that we have in draft form at this point, but we have not finalized pending your comments and input tonight. So that's a brief summary. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Brian. Questions?
Yeah, I just actually had 2 questions on the last page, page 4 of the staff report. Item 3 under the key dates calls for community outreach begins July 26th, I'm assuming through August 10th. Could you speak to us a little bit about what's envisioned as part of that community outreach and who's the lead agency on it?
I think I'd probably defer to the mayor and Councilmember Griselli, since I know that they're probably going to play a lead role in that community outreach.
Very good. Because the 2 communities are running separate assessments, we would be responsible for community outreach here in San Carlos, almost separate and apart from Belmont. We are considering at the fire board level a public information pamphlet that would go out to residences and businesses that would be much like you get when you get your voter information packet, and it just gives you the straight up facts on an issue, and that's what that would look like. But beyond that, any type of campaigning in a private form would be up to a campaign committee.
I guess that's why I asked the question. I mean, is it intended that this be run similar to, I guess, Measure I as a campaign and with all of the associate
similar to any campaign?
Yeah, I was just going to say, during Measure I, the 4 elected representatives in the fire board were in effect the campaign committee. And while, I don't know, if that same structure is going to happen this time around, presumably that may.
I'm seeing our city attorney over there shaking his head. So it's to be determined who would be the lead agency, or who would be the campaign committee.
Well, and again, I guess to clarify, and I'll let the city attorney comment if he will as well, as the mayor indicated, the city's role in this process is to provide neutral information. The fire board, as you probably remember from one of your earlier council meetings, did ask each city to contribute $20,000 towards a educational campaign. So presumably the fire board can still use those funds if they desire to put out neutral information. We do have copies, for example, of the material the city of Pacifica used in their measure, the educational piece. So that is the role the city has, but pretty much that's the line at which we would stop. And then after that, the campaigning is obviously outside of what the city would do.
Just wanted to clarify that, there wouldn't be any problem with 2 of our council members being on a campaign committee. But if we have 3 or more, then I think you run into Brown Act problems. And I don't think you could have all 4 of the members of the JPA on the same committee. It doesn't sound like they will be anyway. It sounds like they'll be separate committees. So we don't even have to go there.
Bob, would you like to add anything?
To the city attorney, though, but however, we could have all council members contribute to any kind of political campaign. They're certainly entitled to that as long as they're not on the committee itself.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I envision, I think, as Mr. Lanzone said, that there would be two campaigns, because Belmont's got to run their campaign and we're going to run our campaign. And it might be very similar and be run very similarly, but they'd be separated dollar-wise, contribution-wise, and everything else-wise.
Okay. So it would really be the JPA that's going to be providing is it the JPA that's providing the neutral community outreach, or that San Carlos, the city of San Carlos would be providing the portion within those residents of San Carlos and mailing the neutral information to residents of San Carlos?
City manager informs me it's the JPA will be putting up the funds to inform members of the overall district as to the facts of each side of this, of each of the two assessment measures.
So it's essentially going to be one mailing, one mailing, even though it's covering two different assessments?
The intent, we had a committee meeting today, as a matter of fact, to interview a couple of firms that have proposed to the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department services to provide public information, neutral, balanced public information. And even though the information will be slightly different, the thought is that the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department would hire a firm that would prepare that neutral information that then could be distributed under that contract to each participating entity within the JPA. So the information will be slightly different, the postcard or the mailing, because the rates will be slightly different as we understand it currently. But the basic information, the package material as to what will be funded by the program and the like would be under that contract.
And then with the assessment ballots, those are mailed also by the JPA, or they're mailed by each local agency? So in the San Carlos would mail them out for San Carlos residents because they come back to the city of San Carlos, and the fire protection would mail out theirs since the fire protection is the lead agency on that piece.
That's
Is
correct.
that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And then I guess the last question I have is what do we do if it doesn't pass?
Well, if it doesn't pass, the funding stays at the base level that we're at today. The funding contribution stays at 50-50, and then it's really up to each community and ultimately the fire board as to whether they want to continue to provide fire services in that format. There is I should mention, a early withdrawal process that's built into the new JPA that says that immediately following the election, either city or both could trigger another dissolution process that would be up in the summer of '07. But other than that, it's really going to, again, be up to the recommendation of the fire board and the decision of each community if one passes and one fails, or they both fail, as opposed to both passing.
Okay.
Just to clarify, though, because, and mostly for the public, I think Councilmember Doherty understands this, but failure is if it fails in one city or the other or both.
Correct.
Achieving success means it passes in both communities. It must pass in both communities for it to be successful.
Just by a simple majority, though. We don't need the 2/3 that were required.
That's right.
That's correct. There's a two-step process. First, you have a majority in favor, and then the second step is the governing body, in this case the San Carlos City Council, has to affirmatively vote to place the assessment on the rolls, very similar to what you did on Industrial Road and Laurel Street, et cetera.
Right.
And the recommendation from our fire board members is $99 for essentially a single-family residence. Do you remember what Measure I was going to be?
Measure I was $88 and 11 cents a square
11.
foot for the commercial.
And so this is a little bit more, but still pretty much within the ballpark. Yes?
Again, it's council judgment as to what's in the ballpark. It's a function of how much money you wish to raise.
Right.
Okay. The only other question I had was just wanted to make sure I read your chart right on the one from Muni Financial, where they come back with recommendations. I guess it's also in your new one. The per unit charge for the residential 3 or more living units.
Yes.
Of a proposed annual assessment of $62.40 under this proposed scenario. That's per unit. So if you had a apartment building with 5 units, or actually make it simple, 10 units, they would be obligated to pay $622.40.
Correct, and actually, this is the revised sheet we have up here.
Yeah,
It's
that's what I'm looking at
$62.40
here.
now, so it would be, you're right, 10 units would be $624 a year. That's correct.
Okay.
And conversely, those folks would have 624 votes in the assessment discussion, because it's weighted based on the amount of your assessment. So the more your annual assessment would be, the more votes you have in the protest process.
And then the last one is, I didn't pull out my calculator actually to figure out, but I noticed on the fire assessment factor share, where it was really nice because we had tables that related to the number of calls in San Carlos, respondent calls, and the estimated property loss. But is our percentage of calls into our call center consistent with what we're seeing as the estimated property loss?
I believe it is, and again, the key on these charts, by the way, is these are just calls for fire suppression. Under the current law for assessment districts, you cannot charge for paramedic calls, and that's the reason these numbers are as low as they are, because as you know, today, 60 to 70% of all calls are actually medical, not fire.
Right, but they do have the nationwide averages as well as nationwide. I mean, that's how we came up with the estimated property tax, again, which covers fire only, and that's why I was interested. There was no percentage given, and again, I didn't pull out my calculator to see if indeed within San Carlos we were essentially following the national average trend in terms of percentage of calls that track to sort of the national averages.
Right, right. And they use the national averages basically as a weighting factor in this complex formula they have, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, could you explain how the results are weighted? If a commercial, which is $322, says no, and a residential, which is $99, says yes, is that basically the tally between those two?
That's correct.
Okay. And the amounts we have listed then relate to individual parcels as the units do to individual units.
Yeah, basically the only category where you're really charging by units are the residential 1 and 2 and the residential 3 and more. The rest are a flat dollar amount per parcel.
And so when we tally the votes, we'll be tallying those no and those yes, and the total wins on a majority.
That's correct. What happens is on the evening of the 24th at 8 p.m., the mayor calls the meeting to order and says, anybody who still has ballots, bring them in, and then he closes the balloting, and then the city clerk works with the consultants to begin the tally on a spreadsheet of the yes and no based on the weighting. Correct.
Okay. And I had a question regarding the delivery of funds or the amount of funds. It looks as though over a 10-year period we'll collect $1.2 million a year.
That's correct.
And that 1.2 over 10 years will fund the items listed.
Well, let me clarify that actually the fire board at their June 30th meeting is recommending to you that you go out 15 years rather than 10. And I'll briefly explain that, and then Mayor Grocott and Councilmember Griselli may wish to amplify. But as I understand their recommendation, which was also shared by the Belmont folks, they were noticing, for example, that some of our obligations like the PERS retirement costs go out 13 years, and the so-called OPEB retiree health go out 20 years, and so they wanted to extend the measure a little bit longer to, by the time the measure was done, fully pay off PERS and mostly pay off the retiree medical. That was the logic as I understood it.
So we have basically spent the money that we expect to get. I mean, it's on the board, and it's going to be used for the stated purpose.
Yeah, those 6 items, yes.
Do we know then, or have we projected what the general fund will have to contribute to the district over this 15-year period?
I think that if you look at one of the 3 attached tables that are called sheet 1, 2, and 3, you'll see how the general fund contributions go over that same, well, I think in this case we only showed you 10 years.
10 years.
I think the most significant jump, obviously, is in the first year where we change from the 50-50 formula to the 53-47. And then after that, it goes up, we're assuming, by a factor of about 3 to 4% a year. Whether that tracks actual costs or not remains to be seen. But obviously, that would be borne by, the, as you say, the general fund.
So as you look forward into anticipating general fund movement over time, you would anticipate a 3 or 4% increase in the amount that goes to.
Right. I think at the staff level, we think the 4.6 is probably a little aggressive. We would probably be more inclined to use 3. So it'll be a little challenging, but we think we can get there.
And then the last question is on the packet that we received. We were anticipating a cost allocation amounts, and it goes from $1 million up to $2.2 million.
Yes.
and of course, the amount per parcel goes up with it.
Right.
Is there any reason to look at something over the 1.2 in
Well,
terms of these other incremental higher dollar amounts?
I think that originally, in our last meeting, we were showing you the one that was, if I remember it correctly, around 1.7 million, and the reason for that is we were trying to cover, let me go back to the other slide, we're trying to cover the 5347 issue. So as you can see here, we're going to have to find another $235,500 every year out of the general fund for the change in what we're calling the JPA revenue adjustment. That was not included in your budget. So if this measure were to pass, presumably at mid-year, we would have to have a discussion with the council on how to find that money. If you went to $1.7 million as your proceeds, you'd cover that. And that's why in the last presentation, the staff was showing you 1.7, not 1.2.
Through the chair, Mr. Moore, I just so everybody's, the 385 is a 10-year average that we figured.
That's correct.
Right. It wasn't, the first year will be lower, the last year will be a lot higher.
Well, actually, if you go to the first sheet, you can see, the shift when you go to the first year. And let's take a look at that. So basically, you begin at 5.3, which is where we are today. And then in the first year, you jump to 5.8. And then it increments after that. So the first year really is the one that's the...
I stand corrected, but the first year then being the largest, and then the rest are much smaller.
That's correct. The first year is when you have the big jump. You hit 8 and 9% the first 2 years, and then after that, it's like 3 to 4% a year. So that's where you get the big sting.
I'm sorry, where are you looking?
On these sheets that you see after
Right.
the first two, and look at the top where it says Belmont Fire Protection District and City of San Carlos, you'll notice then in 2006 and 2007, the numbers are identical. But starting in 2008 and 9 going forward, you notice that suddenly the Belmont number drops by 10%, and the San Carlos number goes up slightly in the first year because it's a half year, and then in the succeeding year, it starts to trend up significantly. And that's the effect of going from the 50-50 to the 53-47. And as Councilmember Grisilli correctly noted, after those first 2 years, when you make the jump, then it goes out 3 and 4% a year. And those are numbers the general fund will have to make up, as Councilmember Davids pointed out.
I had actually, Tom, if you're done, I had just a following question to his question, and this would be to our two fire board members, which is, how did you derive the $99? It was just, that was a nice, easy number, or was there actually some political or some consultant research that was done that said we feel that $99 would be passed by the majority of the people that the assessment was sent to, but at $105 per residential parcel, it would fail? Is that?
There was no independent, we didn't neither have the time nor the funds to go out and do any kind of a survey. I think we looked at it and thought that the last one was $88, and we thought that $99 would be a number that we could operate with. But there's no...
But the 99 doesn't get us to the 1.7 to cover the...
No, it doesn't get us to the
deficit.
1.7, although quite honestly, if you did, if you wanted to add $235,000, you'd only need to go to 1.4 or a little over 1.4.
Yeah. The other variable too, and again, not that I'm suggesting this, but you could also change the 6 items, and if you took some of them off the list, you could also make up the $235,000. That's another option. You don't necessarily have to increase the assessment, but then you'd have to get the agreement of the folks in Belmont to do that.
So essentially be cutting expenditures or cutting services in order to...
That's correct. If you found the $235,000 in the check items, you could stay at the $99 level. You just have fewer items added to the fire budget, if you want to look at it that way.
But we would need Belmont's approval. I'm sorry.
No, sorry. But I was going to say, of the 6 items, the first 2 are to basically cross-staff our truck service, then to pay off a substantial amount of our 20-year retiree medical. This page, I was...
Yeah,
this page.
absolutely.
Okay. And then, as you look at the bottom, you can see there are reserves. We're finally setting up reserves for the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department, which we've, in my opinion, been sorely lacking. We have some operating reserves. we have some engine replacement, we have a building replacement, and then the last item is to add a management analyst, which we think was, to set up a light vehicle, I beg your pardon, a light vehicle replacement. So those latter four are reserves that we're setting up. If we find that our operating is for some reason we're 200,000 to the good, well, that 81 is, each year we're going to look at, I believe, at least the way I understand it, each budget will be looked at individually, and they're in the budget, but we'll look at each line item like we do now.
That's correct.
It's not in concrete that for the next 15 years, all these items are going to be funded every dollar for each time.
Yeah, I think there's 2 points to make to amplify what Councilmember Grisilli said. First of all, the assessment is a maximum, so each year it will come back to the City Council of San Carlos, and you can go up to $99 or $624, the various factors. You don't have to, but you can. The second is, as the council member also indicated, at the fire board level, you don't have to fund all 6 of these items if, for example, as he indicated, you find your reserves are at the level you want. And under the new budget process, the budget now requires 3 approvals, not 1. The fire board has to approve it, and the San Carlos Council and the Belmont Council. So, for example, if this council decided it was getting a little too hard to cover the $235,000 shortfall, or actually in the first year it's going to be more like $480,000, you may indeed not vote to fund some of these add-ons.
It seems to me that, the reason why we're in such a predicament right now is because we haven't set aside reserves. We've been running this so lean that, I don't have an issue whatsoever. And in fact, I think it's actually a very positive step that they're looking at setting aside reserves now to pay for future capital costs that we know we're going to need in terms of engine replacements and other vehicle replacements. So it's not that. I just wanted to know if there was any statistical or quantitative data behind the $99 threshold. And if not, my recommendation is that we bump it up, that I don't think that there's that big of a difference between the $99 and, say, the $142.50 that would get us to the $1.75 million. Again, to Brian's point, if we don't need it, we don't have to go after it. But given what's happening in our own general fund and the continued cuts that we're having to make, it's going to take just as much effort, I think, to get the 142 as it is the 99. And I don't want to have to go back to the voters in 2 or 3 years with yet another request, because that's what I feel like a lot of agencies have been doing, which is funding just enough for what they see they need for that time, not wanting to go out for more, and then realizing within a couple of years that it's not enough and having to go back out again to the voters. Yeah,
and of the 2 that have passed, you have, both theories at work. Pacifica's was $75 a year. The one in Millbrae, on the other hand, is around $130 or $140 a year. They both passed by over 70%. So, again, but I think at the end of the day, it's the judgment of the council as to which approach you want to use. And obviously, the other piece of the puzzle, too, is, to the extent you don't cover your general fund costs here, you're going to have to revisit it in January.
This is a pretty lean budget, isn't it?
I know you don't want to go back to the cut list, but it is an option.
There's also within, for instance, the retiree medical, some decisions to be made, as I understand it, regarding we can either put money into a restricted fund that can't be touched or used for anything else, allow it to earn interest, and it helps to that reserve fund, if you will, that set-aside fund, the interest it earns helps to pay that obligation, and so that would reduce some of the costs and
the other choice.
That outstanding balance over time.
Fairly nominal. That's what, 2 to 3%?
It actually adds up. If you look at the report that I believe what was it, Muni Financial that gave us that report?
Well, that was Mr. Bartel.
Excuse me.
Essentially, where we think we may be, I think the mayor is right. The PERS may be getting into the business of helping to fund retiree medical, and they, because of the size of their investment pool, may be able to get more of a return than we are. Mm-hmm. The other variable you have, and you can see it on the board here, right now we are recommending that you pay off your current retiree medical obligation over 20 years. That's sort of the recommended accounting standard. However, some cities are choosing to do that over 30 years. And if you did that, you could save about $25,000 a year. I think at the end of the day, the fire board looked at that and didn't think that was a significant enough savings on a per-year basis on the assessment to mess with it, but it is a choice.
And it's still a choice after the assessment. If the
Correct.
assessment passes, it's still a choice we could make if we decided that it was, too
Yes.
difficult to.
Yes, yes.
Right. Okay, we're, I think, looking for some direction here, and primarily Councilmember Doherty has hit on it, and to explain a little bit, I think what Bob and I did is we looked at what we thought would be the most important political factor, that being single-family residential, and what would be the tolerance after we, of course, it wasn't just straight up, let's pick a number that we think is politically acceptable, but we also looked at the things we were trying to fund, the amount of money we were trying to raise, and then looked at those numbers and went back and forth, plugged in the numbers into the formula that was provided for us. But ultimately, it does come down to what does one think is tolerable for a single-family voter, and also given the fact that if you look at the numbers, the dollars that single-family residences would pay into this assessment is 65%. So that means it's 65% of the vote as well. So those are the things that we wrestled with and settled on the $99. Understanding then that once you set that figure, it also sets all the other figures for multifamily, commercial, et cetera.
If we went to the higher number, what would it do to the commercial, industrial, institutional?
Well, again, I think that's where the tables at the end of the report will help you.
Yeah.
And essentially, for example, to if we go with these 6 items, and as Councilmember Grisilli suggests, we raise another $235,000, you're roughly at more or less the $1.5 million.
I was actually looking at the 1.75.
Okay,
Flip
well,
the page.
we'll clearly be at one of those two, which means that you would be talking about a residential in the amount of 122 to 142, and commercial would be moving up to either 300 or 350. And again, and this is part of why we're here tonight and asking for your direction, we would want to know whether your thought would be to strictly cover the 236, or whether you also want to cover, at least in the initial years, some of that 5347 beyond that. It's strictly up to the council as to how much of the fire costs you want to cover through the assessment versus how much you want to go back to the general fund and cover it there. It's a balancing act.
Is there a need to be somewhat in tune with Belmont?
Belmont's is probably going to be in the mid-80s. I think the estimate was around 85 to 88, depending on whether they raised $1 million or $1.1 million. And I think that Mayor Grocott and Councilmember Grisilli were looking at that as well. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you were looking at that as well.
We did look at the fact that, right out of the gate, almost, Corlin Firebrock, one of the board members from Belmont, said that she did not think, and she's done her own non-scientific polling, if you will, of citizens. They have a lot of the advantage in Belmont is that they have a lot of homeowner associations, and so they've been going to those and talking to them, and didn't seem to be a tolerance for anything over $100, and so that's where they were right out of the gate. And we did feel like if we're running a separate assessment, it is important at least to have the numbers be somewhat comparable and not be too far off in the two cities.
Isn't it true, though, that, Belmont's already taxing through the Belmont Fire Protection District for fire services, and so the $80 would be incremental on top of an assessment, an assessment or a tax that property owners and businesses within Belmont are already paying?
Well, they have a couple of advantages. First of all, you're right, Councilmember Teagle Doherty, they do have a line item on the property tax. They get 20 cents off of every dollar for fire. Second, because it's for public safety, it is not subject to ERAF. And but anyway, I guess the other point I would make is that in the current year, they do have more resources. They have $5.8 million for fire even before the assessment. So they do have more resources, and I think that does allow them the luxury of having a lower assessment, yes.
So if we look at total net amounts that a homeowner, a single-family homeowner in Belmont were paying with the assessment and the current fire protection district tax or whatever it is. Do you have the total of that amount?
Well, actually, because of Prop 13, there is no difference. It's part of the 1%. It's basically who gets the 1%. Part of what happened, just to go back a quick step, in San Carlos is in the pre-Prop 13 area, this city was proud of the fact it had a very low tax rate. These are the days where the city council by its own vote could set the so-called mill rate or the tax rate. And we were at 12 or 13 cents. Belmont was at 23 cents, almost double. When Prop 13 passed, that locked those shares of the 1% in forever. And that's one of the reasons that as you look around this county, most cities get, in fact, 20 cents on the dollar, and we get 12 cents minus the ERAF. We end up with 8 or 9 cents. And that's one of the reasons the budget here is so challenging every year. We don't have the property tax flow others do.
I guess my whole point is that I don't think that we're comparing apples and apples when we look at what San Carlos needs in terms of an assessment and what Belmont is going out of the gate with, because they're funded differently. I mean, we certainly, I think, need to go out to San Carlos residents and business and property owners and explain to them and educate them around, why we need to ask for more money. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking for more money if that's what it's going to take, but I certainly think that, I think it may be an artificial tie to try to, because Belmont is doing something that we in San Carlos should do the same thing or be constrained to the same amounts. The other question I was going to throw out there, Brian, and I don't know if, I know when we looked at Measure I, the one area that seemed to have the most concern was the senior community, because they are on fixed incomes, and that this to them was yet another burden. And whereas I think perhaps some of the younger single families that are in homes now, or that may be a bit more affluent because of the high cost of property, actually, to them, the difference between $99 and $140 is
$50.
Is nothing. I mean, nobody pays attention to it. It's just another thing. Is there the opportunity in an assessment district to build in sort of like what I would call senior exemptions, or an on-request senior exemption?
I'll turn that question to our special counsel, Ms. Kassman, since she has familiarity with the Millbrae.
I'm seeing her nodding her head no.
Happy summer. It's very nice to see you all again. The problem with an assessment, if you consider it a challenge, is that you're assessing the use of property and the benefit of property, and you're not looking at who owns the property and what their particular condition or age or disability is. So you do not have the opportunity to look beyond the property, the classification of property, the property use, because that is really the basis of calculating your assessment.
And we can't use any of the funds that are raised by the assessment to effectively rebate or create rebates for special cases or...
No. You cannot create special cases based on the human condition of the owner. You have to look at the use of the property. So in that way, a tax does give a council more flexibility. An assessment does not have that flexibility.
What about, and I'll look to our city attorney here, do we, as part of our general fund, have the ability to set aside funds for that purpose? If we so chose, or...
You mean...
Again, I'm...
Brian said a gift of public funds.
See, we can either...
No.
Well, no, we can either look at it as we pay money out of our general fund into fire services, thereby lowering the amount, and I don't know what the current demographics are. Do you guys have any idea in terms of demographics, or what percentage of San Carlos residents are 65 and older?
We could certainly look it up, although our experience in recent years is the community is getting a lot younger because the house prices are going up and a lot of the high-tech folks are moving in and starting families.
Oh, agreed. Anecdotally, I mean, I would assume the same thing.
But we can certainly look that up if you'd like to get it, yes.
Well, you can kind of understand where...
Well, I understand where you're going. I just, unfortunately, the way we lock into an assessment, I think I didn't personally, and again, the mayor may just have another opinion on this, I didn't personally try to so much tie it to Belmont as I felt we need to pass this. That's the way I looked at it. So what's going to pass? I mean, I'd like to make it $1. I mean, it'd be great, and we could pass it. Is 100, you know, I go to like $1,425,000, and I've done my rough numbers, and I know they're rough, but they're probably pretty darn close to what Moody Financial does. $1,425, if you raised $1,425, that's $116 for a single-family home. Remembering, though, that each time we go up $1 or something on this, all the other assessments go up. So you basically go from $243 to $285 for commercial, you know, and all the rest go up proportionally the same way. You know, all these other, which count as votes, and they're all weighted as, you know, Tom asked the question and as was described. So again, you're trying to strike a happy median of not only getting, hopefully, most of the single-family folks voting with you, but certainly you need some percentage of everybody else to vote with you, because if everybody else votes no.
Oh, agreed. And again, you know, I kind of look at it as, you know, with Millbrae passing it at what, 120, 130?
I think it was 140, wasn't it?
Or 140?
148.
So, and, you know, Millbrae, I think, is in somewhat of similar, is a similar demographic, much closer than Pacifica, for example.
Joan is saying they're older and more senior, actually.
Oh, and even then, they're willing to.
We did address this very issue in Millbrae. In fact, not just with people, with institutions too. The school districts in Millbrae were unhappy that they were being asked to pay an assessment and thought that there should be some compensation and came to the council. And, of course, the answer again was, you're a property owner. And we can't look at the fact that you do wonderful things and you educate our children and you owe this assessment. But in Millbrae, we have, I think, an older population. I mean, I would say about half the city is very young, but they have a more significant senior population.
And so just from the standpoint of the educational campaign, did you have longer than what looks like 14 days? Is it 2 weeks here within our schedule?
You're going to have longer than that. You're going to have almost a month and a half. And so, again, was it a similar timing? Because I would imagine that in order to get people on board with almost $150, which I would be with Bob, which that seems like, you know, quite a big assessment when, in fact, 2/3 of the vote turned down the last one to Measure I. Was it similar timing or? Very similar, because Millbrae did a lot of their education leading up to the decision to assess. And I think you, as a city, have done something similar. I mean, you have been working with this issue for quite a long time, and I think your constituents are probably well aware of the need for revenue. Now, that having been said, you will, not this council and certainly not public monies, but hopefully there will be a campaign of some sort to further educate in an intense manner over that period of time the need for this. You've got to create the story, and a compelling one. But there has been, I think, in this city a great deal of discussion and debate about the need for revenue. Now, how much, again, becomes the balancing act, and the need to create the reasons and the justification.
Through the chair, I don't mean to put Vice Mayor Davids on the spot, but I don't know if you have a weigh in on this, on the dollars. You've been here longer than I have, and, you know, I just would be interested in what your opinion would be on this.
I have a bit of a problem with the Belmont the comparability, and I agree that, you know, we're a different situation than they are, but we're going to have to convince the public that they should pay, let's say, $50 more than the folks in Belmont pay, and then we have to answer the question, well, why? And then you know how that goes. I just don't know that we want to put ourselves in a position where we are that far from, you know, from their decision. And I agree with Councilmember Guzzelli that this is a one-shot deal. We got to make it work. And if we play around too hard with the numbers and we miscalculate, we're in a bad spot. So I prefer to go to 124. but I'd rather get 99 than nothing, and I am concerned about getting too far afield from Belmont.
Through the chair also, hello, through the chair also, Mr. Morrow, when we're discussing, as I understand this new business, we're basically discussing this evening, and when would the council have to come up with its final number?
To stay on your current schedule, you would take final action on the 24th. My thought was if we could get some direction tonight from the council on where you thought the number was, where you wanted to stay with the 99 or do something, we would be able to tweak the draft resolution of intent and the draft report. If we don't do that tonight and we come back on the 24th, we may have to have a subsequent action by you unless the Muni folks are able to sort of calculate it on the spot, which maybe they're able to do. I don't know. They can bring their Excel spreadsheet. Their magic
Maybe
spreadsheets.
I can help them with that. I don't know.
What else are we, I would like to know from Councilmember Doherty, if we go to the 1.75 figure, what are you proposing we pay for it? Because we've given a list of items that at the fire board that we are looking at funding, and certainly staff has put in this 385 figure, which is an average again. But even if you add the 385 to the 1.26 that we're talking about, you're at 1.65, and
Well, you don't really have to do that. You basically you're looking at 235. You're already at 1.2. So as I said before, you're basically looking at 1431. I mean, net ballpark, approximately 1450 would, well, maybe 1475 gross would get you to a zero number, wouldn't it? I believe.
Well, yeah. I think the main reason you would, or there's two reasons that you might do that. First of all, is to reduce the general fund share of fire in the first 10 or 15 years, and the second, more specifically, is that the first year is going to be the hardest when we jump $450,000. So if you get 385, you're most of the way there. But in theory, you could pick the other 75.
Brian, in this year, we already did make a jump of some kind.
That's
did we
correct,
not?
but this is on top of that.
On top of that.
You're correct, Mayor Grocott. We did add 350,000 roughly to cover just base, but this would be
That got us to 5.2, did it not?
It went. That's right. It went from 4.9 to 5.3, and now what we're talking about is going from 5.3 to 5.8, and that's the function of going from 50/50 to 53/47. And it's the first year is the speed bump, if you will. After that, it increments up at 4% a year. But that first jump is going to be nasty.
I'm sorry, I'm not following you because
Go to Model 1.
I've got that.
City of San Carlos, and you'll see both cities at 4.9, both cities at 5.2.
Right.
And then you see suddenly it's 4.7 and 5.3. That's the base. And then the following year, suddenly it's 5.8 and 5.1. That's the challenging.
So that's out in year 09, we go to 5.8.
Well, it's the same difference. It's $500,000 difference in 08.
Yeah, I think the labels are 1 year off because essentially we're going to have half a year at the new rate. So I think, well, my guess is it's probably the coming year.
Yeah. So to answer your question, Matt, I look at this as costs are going to continue to go up. I mean, overall, if you look at our liability in terms of paying into the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department, we're looking at anywhere from $5.3 million all the way up to $7.2 million 10 years out. Actually, $7.7 million as our share. And we're going out with an assessment that essentially is only asking to raise $1.75 million. That means that future councils are going to have to come up with an additional $6 million out of general funds. And I don't believe over the next 10 years that our general fund revenues are going to be growing at that rate to be able to cover. So again, if we're looking out, not just, how do we fund to this year, next year, and the third year after that, and then sort of drop it off to future councils to figure out how to continue to fund what I'm seeing as a ballooning cost of providing fire protection within San Carlos. I think it's in our best interest at this point to to explain, again, go out, educate the voters. It takes the same amount of energy to educate the voters to pass a $145, pick a number, $150 assessment for the next 10 years as it does $99. But what that does from the city's standpoint over the next 10 years is it allows us to at least start to look out towards more future councils to set aside the reserves as we've started to do, perhaps even to set aside additional reserves in anticipation of some of these future costs.
Okay. However, the revenues that you're looking at in that line where it gets up to City of San Carlos in year 2016 at 7.75 million is that's the Thomas Phil over at the City of Belmont, who works for the fire board, just applying these. If you look at these figures here where it says Belmont Fire Protection District 3.46 and San Carlos 4.6, all he's doing is finding.
They're compounding. He's put a year-over-year 4.6 annual increase on, and it may be 4%, it may be 2%. But from a conservative standpoint, I think what we do know from past experiences is that costs are going to continue to rise. If we look at what our cost was for South County Fire back in the year 2000 versus what it is this year in 2006, I don't even.
Yeah, it's been you're right, Councilmember Teagle Doherty. The South County fire costs have been moving up historically faster than this chart shows. So part of what we're going to have to do is, even if the assessment passes, we have to really control costs at the new fire department. And again, I'd point out that the staff estimate of our year-to-year costs right now in the current budget are 3% for sales tax and 4% for property tax, and this is saying to make this work, we have to be at 4.6, which we're not currently at. So it's an ambitious, scenario.
Okay, but now if I may finish my statement that I was interrupted on, the percentages that are there, the 3.46 for Belmont Fire District and the 4.61 is Thomas Phil looking backwards over the history of the two cities and saying, what he's saying is, conservatively, this is what I think the revenue growth will be based on property taxes going up and so forth. So you can expect to see, conservatively, these kinds of numbers being able to come out of these two agencies based on historical growth, and these are the revenues that you can see. And then what he did is he's looking at those numbers, and he's also looking at cost, and it all works out. If you look at the very bottom, he has projected ending balances, and they stay pretty consistent, but it looks as though the expected revenue increases, the expected revenue expenditure, let me get that correct, the expected growth in expenditures can be covered by the expected growth in revenues. The other thing that is a factor here is that what we're hoping to do is pay off a side fund. And when the side fund is paid off, one of the huge increases that you've seen since 2000 in the expenses to the fire department is related to PERS, and the PERS rate being at 48%, meaning we pay, for every dollar we pay a firefighter, we have to pay 48 cents to cover his PERS retirement, his or her. One of the ideas with this assessment is to be able to pay that side fund down and thereby lower the PERS rate. And the chart in here shows that happening in 13 years, which is why we picked 15 years to make sure we could cover that. Once that PERS rate starts to drop, so does our expenditures.
Matt, the bottom line is that the revenue section is what the City of San Carlos is going to be obligated to pay wherever it finds the money from into the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department. If we don't have, unlike Belmont that has a Belmont Fire Protection District that is going out and has revenue coming in to offset the cost of fire, we have to pull it out of our general fund. We have to pull it out of our general fund. And what Brian has said is that our general fund is not growing at 4.6%.
That's correct. The finance department in San Carlos's estimate is 3.5%.
So if our estimate is growing at 3.5%, that means we have to we cannot support, without additional funding, support a stronger than 3.5% growth into Belmont San Carlos Fire Department. And we just can't print money. As much as we'd like to, you just can't print money. And so what this is essentially doing is saying that 15 years out, San Carlos, the city of San Carlos liability to the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department, according to this budget document, is going to be over almost $8 million. Right now, our current whole budget is $22 million.
Something on that order, yes.
21, 22 million. And so I just don't believe
And
that
our
it's
budget,
sustainable.
our full city budget at that time will probably be somewhere on the order of 35 million if we're at 22 now, because everything will go up.
At 3.5%, not 4.6. And this document, this whole budget, is based on a growth of 4.6%. So I guess my point is if we're hoping at all to try to get someplace, some amount of assessment that's actually not going to just only cover what we're going to need for this year and the next couple of years, but 3 or 4, 15 years out, I think that we as a council really ought to be looking at a higher assessed rate, and because I don't think that we're going to be able to go back out again and ask, or future councils are going to be able to go back out again and ask for more money.
If I could, all of it makes a lot of good sense. The difficulty is it's a Hobson's choice. You have to have the money to pay the bill. Whether we have a Belmont San Carlos Fire District or whether we are by ourselves or with Redwood City or San Mateo, to even go back to that argument, these numbers are not going to change, in my opinion. They're not going to change a whole lot on your costs. Maybe they're going to drop. Maybe they aren't. But these dollars are out there. So how are we going to end up paying for it? But yet we have to have additional revenue. The other thing, if I could jump for a second, just to the reality of what we have to do on the 24th. We're not, as I said, we're not, as I understand, we're not deciding tonight.
Correct.
I don't want to go back to Muni Financial. Well, we have a number of choices here. And the last thing I want to do is on the 24th go, here's a 19th choice, and have to go back to these people. Unfortunately, I choose my words carefully here. I don't believe it's a difficult thing to do, but for some reason they have other clients besides ourselves. We're not the only client they have. And they can't respond perhaps as quickly as we might like them to. And if we get delayed past the 24th, then we're going to be in a jackpot. So if we have any numbers that we want to put out that we don't have here, I think we need to do it, if I'm correct.
That would be helpful. That is the direction I'm looking for.
And if so, if there's anything in between here that we haven't come up with, and again, they came up with different numbers from, what is it, $1.2 million to 2.3, I guess. We have some different variables there.
Correct, yeah. Their numbers for 1,206,000 and ours were 115 something. They were pretty close, as you said.
Right. But the law says, as I understand it, that they have to give us these numbers. So
yeah,
I don't have any trouble with this discussion, except that if there's any numbers that aren't on a piece of paper that Muni Financial gave us, let's give them the number and make sure we get it by that date.
Yeah,
otherwise, we're in a real jackpot.
That would be good.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to imply that I think that we ought to delay the process.
No, I didn't mean to imply that you were trying to do that. Believe me, trust me. I just want to make sure that we all understand that whatever number we want to come up with, Muni Financial will run for us. I want to make sure that we have the numbers on a piece of paper from them so that we don't have a problem on the 24th. We can sit here and vote on the 24th and pick one of the 5 options or 6.
From that standpoint, I don't have an issue with any of the ones that are currently on this piece of paper. I'm not suggesting that we come up with something
I'm not saying you
new
don't.
or
I just
different.
want to make sure that we don't. If you want to, let's tell them now, because otherwise we will delay it.
That would be
that
helpful.
was just a practical side of it.
So maybe we can get through this and just kind of do a straw vote, starting from the highest amount, or from the $142, which would cover 1.75 allocation, and see, based on these numbers, working our way backwards or down, where there would be support. Because at the end of the day, we have to get consensus to be able to give staff direction to prepare the documents that we're going to need to do on the 24th.
Before we do that,
I'm sorry, excuse me, could I ask one question, please?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Is it imperative that we come up with some range or something for you to do this? I'm a little concerned about even doing that until we get all 5 members here to participate in this on the 24th.
I think where the council was going earlier about saying that if you had additional numbers beyond what we've presented you, it'd be helpful for me if I had that tonight, so I would have it for you on the 24th. But other than that, I think we're in good shape. I do have a draft of the resolution of intent. I do have a draft of the report, so all I got to do is plug in those numbers.
You could write the numbers in.
So like if I said $150, then you'd have to go back to Muni and have them recalculate.
Right.
However, if I said $142.50, we're good to go.
Yeah.
And my suggestion was actually to kind of go through the numbers that we have and see if there's consensus.
Well, the only reason I'm pushing back a little bit on that is I don't think we need. I would rather have the 5th person here, to be quite honest. And secondly, it's not a necessity, because on the 24th, as long as we give you a number that's on one of our pages, you can put it in, and we're not going to be delayed.
That's correct.
Well, again, that's why I was asking for sort of a straw vote, because I think if the 4 of us can agree on a number, or 3 out of the 4 of us can agree on a number, that would probably be helpful information for staff, because then it's just on the 24th we've thought through it. If it's clearly split 1-3 or 2-2, then it gives us, it would give me time to sort of go back and really think about, because I'm obviously the one here as a proponent for a higher assessment than the 2 fire board members are recommending, and I think it just would be helpful for me to understand kind of where the level of support is, because this is kind of, I'm looking at Tom and, I'm thinking, okay, I heard him throw out 122. If I come down to 122, can I get these 2 guys to come up to 122 from their 99? Because all of this, there is no quantitative data supporting any one of these numbers. We could sit here and flip a coin or do a randomizer and come up with a number that's just as good as any of these.
That's so much not the case. And I think that's really important to respond to, because one thing we did not do is just simply say, okay, this is a number that's tolerable, we'll go for this. We looked, Bob and I and the whole fire board looked very hard at this 10-year budget. We looked very hard at what items we thought should be considered to be paid for and which ones should not. And we want to be very clear also when we go to the voters for the assessment that here are the items that we see ourselves paying for with the money that you've been willing to give us, in addition to the property tax you already pay, to cover things with fire service and to build reserves and to have truck replacement and so on and so forth. We looked very hard at those things, and we wrestled back and forth with the political issue of how much are people willing to pay, and the straight-up issue of what it is we need to pay for. So it isn't just picking a number out of the air and saying, we think people would be willing to pay for this, and then we'll go figure out what we're going to buy. It's not that at all. We went back and forth on those. I'll also throw in that something I'm hearing quite frequently already from folks mostly via some emails is, and I heard this when I gave the address, the State of the City address as the mayor. Why should we vote for something that was at $88, and why should we pass a new assessment? And, oh, by the way, it's, $50 higher than it was 2 years ago, when, we struggled very hard over the last 6 months to write a new JPA agreement and have a 10-year budget in place, look at all these items, come up with a 5-year contract with Local 2400. That is not easy, coming up with a 5-year contract with any labor group. Those are things that we worked very hard for, and part of that was to make sure that on the labor agreement was so that we could at least look out 5 years and know how much money we would be expected to budget for labor, which is the predominant amount of what it is you're paying for when you have a fire department. So we've worked very hard on these things and tried to come up with a number that is reasonable.
Yeah, Matt, I'm sorry if you misunderstood or if I miscommunicated. In terms of this quantitative data, I did not mean to imply that our fire board members hadn't done their homework. I know you guys have spent long hours on this, and I certainly appreciate the effort you guys have put into this. It was simply, when you talk about the political will, what is that political dollar figure that the public is willing to bear? On that piece alone, we have no quantitative data. And if you look at the Measure I from 2 years ago, had it been an assessment, it would have passed. Unfortunately, because we went out as a measure as a tax, it failed to reach the 2/3 majority. So I think that since that time, a lot has happened. We've set the stage actually with real data about, we've had rolling brownouts. We've continued to struggle with how to balance our budget. We've continued to cut funds. So in my mind, the story is an easy one to tell because it's true. We don't have money. We're continuing to face a ballooning budget. I mean, as much as I wish we could reduce these costs, and maybe we can get some economies of scale, because this is not sustainable, and I think is going to force regionalization of fire protection. I think we owe it to these voters, as well as future councils and future residents and businesses, to try to get this right. South County Fire failed because they didn't have enough money and because of the structure of it. And I don't want to basically set up the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department to fail because we think that $99 is the right amount, when in fact going out there and telling the story, we could actually be getting the $140 that would help to fund future, fund some of these future liabilities that either this council or future councils are going to have to grapple with.
Well, the only point I believe me, and as Mayor Grocott mentioned, we grappled with this back and forth. I looked at a $235,000 number there, and I believe that's the number on the page.
That's correct. That's the.
And I looked at that, and I looked at our budget. And our budget this year only, and it's going to have to go up. I mean, not our fire budget, but our regular city budget is approximately $25 million.
Something like that, yeah.
So it's little less than 1%. And I made the choice. I mean, personally, the way I came at it, it's going to be easier for me to find 1% or less every year than it is for me to get $150 as opposed to $99. I mean, that's how I looked at it personally. And I said, I'll find $235,000, and that's an average, because some years, the first year, it's going to be much higher than, perhaps much higher, and then after that, less. And as our budgets go up, if the budget in 5 years is $30 million, and we don't need the $235, maybe we need $115,000, now it's 0.5% or less than that. And I think, but again, that was my choice, my idea of where we're trying to fund these dollars. Meanwhile, we have this $1.2 million or $1.3 million, whatever number we come up with, coming in each year to be able to help us. Without this passing, then we're back in the soup again, regardless of the work that we've put in. I mean, you can work on a project so long, and again, we've all done it, and you fall in love with it so much that you can't see any other things that could happen. Okay? And I don't think I've done that. I've tried not to. I've looked at that number, and I said, I think I can find something that will not cripple this city to get perhaps less than 1% every year to figure out some way to make it come out. And I'm just telling you how I came to my decision.
And I respect that. I mean, that's why I asked Joan Castman so many questions about Millbrae, because they're facing the same thing. And if they had basically gone out and asked for $99 and told a different story, maybe they wouldn't have gotten it. But they told the right story. It's a recent example. It's a current example of being able to go out to the community, tell them why you need whatever the number is, $120, $100, $99. I mean, to me, $99 is kind of like, hey, $99.95, Everyone likes the nines.
Trying to get a yes. But,
yeah, exactly. I just don't think that if we went and asked for more than $99, if that would be the difference between a yes and a no.
I'm not sure that 99, the more or less 99 would, I agree with you. I'm not sure it would be. I think the key is to try to identify a number that's practical to ask for and also reasonable to fund our budget. And as I said, I look at $1,450,000, which is $118, and to me that easily covers the $235. if we wanted to go $19 more than what we've come up with. Again, these are I don't know if 1450 is even on your sheet. This is Bob's special Excel that he whipped up that you don't have.
Muni has a 1.5, which is at 122.40.
Right, and 1450 is approximately 118 ballpark.
We could certainly run it if you want to see it.
Yeah, but anyway, I mean, we could talk about this, and again, it's not late, please don't get me wrong, but we could talk about this for hours and hours. The consensus is split and again, I'm not trying, I apologize through the mayor, I'm not trying to take over, but the consensus is split here. It appears that at least two of us are sort of on the lower end, one on the higher end, and I think, I don't want to speak for Vice Mayor Davids, if you want your straw, I mean, you've sort of got it, except for Vice Mayor Davids, so.
It's true, and I think Tom is someplace in between, if I could speak for him. At least what I heard you say, somewhere around 120. Go ahead.
Well, that's what I said, but I'm not sure that I believe what I said.
Oh.
I mean, it's easy to throw out numbers, but the practicality of getting that number is what concerns me. What I do like is the list, because I think you can take this list to the taxpayer and say, here's our problem, this is what we're going to fund,
right?
And it's very well defined. I go to Inga's approach, it'd be certainly nice to get a cushion for the general fund, because that's where we got to take out the balance, but we've always had that problem. It's been with us ever since we started the fire district. It will continue to be with us because we will continue to fund the fire department out of the general fund, and it's going to go higher, which means the fund has to kick in more. And I think from a taxpayer's point of view, that's how where it's always been, and so that's what the city would have to do. And what the city's asking me, the taxpayer, for is the relief to get the new group up and running and to take care of the needs that were not met during the South County Fire Days. So we deal with the question of the people or the firefighters on the trucks. We deal with reserves, all the other things that are on the list, and that's very identifiable. If I have to go to the taxpayer and say, we've got this problem for the next 15 years, and we'd like to get a cushion to help with the general fund, I have a lot harder time convincing people, or I think I'd have a harder time convincing them of that. But I do think the list speaks for itself and is quite understandable. So, at this point, in terms of coming down on the side of a number, I would be inclined to stay with the $99, which I think is a minimum number, but it's an explainable number. And if there's any number that's going to get this thing going, it's that number. Any number higher just may be a problem and sink the ship, which I think is
Just for clarification, the $99 doesn't cover what's on the list. The $99 is a shortfall, right?
Well, the $99 covers the 6 items you have up there, assuming that that's what this council approves. But then at the bottom, it generates the $235,000 shortfall, which, as Councilmember Griselli said, is an average over the 10 years. The real challenge for you is going to be in the second year. The first year is a half year, so you have a bit of a bump as you go from 50/50 to 53/47. But the second year, when you have the $450,000 gap, you're going to have 150 covered by this. The other 300, the general fund is going to have to take. So that's going to be your big challenge, I think.
So just really for clarification, the 1.4 that Bob was talking about, or 1.42, is the list.
No, excuse me, Councilwoman Tickle Doherty. The list is a million, as it says there, am I going to read?
Yeah,
the $1,055,000.
$1,055,000.
Right.
Okay. Staff has determined that our JP revenue adjustment, which is the next 2 lines down, is $385,000.
Correct.
And that's because of the 43 or the 53-47 split.
Okay.
Yes.
So
right.
if
So we're
we make
picking
the
up.
list-
We pick up if you raise $1.2 million, which is $99, you pick up $150 each year. So less the 380. Again, that's the average.
Right.
So you're short 235 average.
So our portion of the list under the new funding formula, assuming that it passes, would be at 1.489.
No, it's $1,055,000, the 6 items.
The 6
But
items.
that's based on the old funding formula.
No,
No?
it's based
That's
on
based on the new
funding
Average
formula.
cost over 10 years.
Right.
That's what
Average cost
the
over 10
so-called
years.
shopping list.
The new
Yes.
funding. Belmont's is 936. Ours is 1055.
Yes.
Wait, and then the other, I guess the question I'd ask is, is there any implied increase in this to cover inflation or anything else?
Yes.
Well, that's the 3 to 4% a year. And again, that requires, as I think you had mentioned earlier, we're going to have to watch this budget because this budget usually comes in higher than that.
Even on these items,
But even on these
there's an
items?
increase that was built in. What we asked them to do was do the increase and then level it so that we get the average each
So
year.
the actual
That's what these
first-year
numbers are.
cost is not actually $1,055,000?
No, that's
And the
right.
actual last year cost isn't $1,055,000. The $1,055,000 is someplace,
It's an average.
It's an
that
average.
was an average.
Mr. City Attorney, am I at liberty to say anything about our tentative labor agreement?
It hasn't been ratified?
It's been approved by the agency, but not the union.
Oh, apparently it has not been ratified by the
Membership?
all the members, that's correct. So
Okay,
it's
well,
not official.
Then I'll keep it general. Suffice to say, and I appreciate what Councilmember Grisilli said about the percentages. One of the things that, the ways that I looked at this is that you've got three parties at the table, essentially. You've got us as a city and our general fund and what we're willing to put into this and a little bit of sacrifice we're willing to make. You've got the voters who are going to for an assessment, and you have the firefighters who were willing to negotiate with us, come up with a 5-year contract, and I can't say specifically what, but have some give-backs, if you will, in order to make this whole thing happen. And that's partly the way I look at it as well, is everybody is coming to the table and giving a little bit, including the city and our general fund and what we have to deal with.
Well, I'll concede the point. You guys have convinced me. So, if $99 is the recommendation and, Tom's bought into it, I would suggest that we go ahead with the 99 and,
I don't think we can make a decision tonight.
no, we're giving direction to staff.
It's just direction,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm not
Okay,
making
I'm
a
sorry, I
motion or
apologize.
anything.
I didn't mean to have you make an illegal motion there.
Oh, my goodness. Wouldn't want to do that. No, so that would be, so do we want to give direction to staff for that amount then?
I think we have.
That would be my choice.
Staff need anything else?
That's good.
I had one other question.
Oh, yeah, I should ask, is you talk about 15 years now, not 10, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Good point. Thank you, Brian.
I had a question on step 2. Step 2 means that we would bill this, we would hand bill this first year.
That's correct. And what we're told by Muni Financial, because it won't be in the property tax, you'll probably only get 60% roughly of people paying. However, in the second year, you can add whatever was not paid in the first year to the property tax bill. So that's probably the first year you'll see full payment and then some. The other interesting variable, and we talked about this a bit at the fire board, is the county has the option of paying the city the entire amount under a obscure law called the Teeter Plan. And the reason the county might want to do this for us, as strange as that might sound to you, is if they invoke the Teeter Plan, they prepay the amount we're owed, and then they get to keep all the penalties money, which can be quite lucrative. Now, the option on whether or not they prepay each year is solely the county's option. It's not ours, but we've been led to believe that on assessments like that, it's highly likely the county might invoke the Teeter Plan. So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So just to wrap up, so to loop back, you are correct, Councilmember Davids, that in the first year we probably will see only roughly half of the money. However, since this is probably not going to kick in until mid-year anyway, we think that will probably work for us. But in the second year, we expect to get all the money plus whatever we didn't get in year one.
Plus any penalties on the first year.
Assuming the county doesn't take the Teeter Plan.
Mr. Moore,
Can we add the penalties? I mean, if we don't go with the Teeter Plan, can we add the penalties to the first year?
I think the penalties are automatic.
Are they? Okay.
just to clarify, if you will, for the public, Brian, because it gives, at least I believe it could be possible, what you just said might give folks in, the public the impression that if somehow one manages not to pay in the first year, then they're off the hook. But that's not the case. And in fact, what we would see as a fire agency, if you will, is a bump in funds beyond what we would expect in that second year, because we would be getting what we weren't, the 40% we weren't paid in the first year. Eventually, it comes to us.
That's correct. We would collect the penalties in the second year and the balance. The only problem would be the city of San Carlos would have to front the money in the first year.
Correct. Okay. Very good. I wanted to make sure, since we do have folks here in the audience, was there anybody who wanted to speak on this item before we, I don't have any speaker cards, but before we get off of the item? Would you please come forward to the mic? Come forward to the mic, please.
Good evening. My name is Brian Randall, San Carlos. I'd like to point out that speed is of the essence here. I don't want to see a delay like with the soccer. It's been set back so far. That only caused people to get upset. A delay here can cause a loss of life. We don't have the service we should have right now, and we need to move on this fast. Thank you.
And I do believe that's also the point that Mr. Grisilli was making earlier. That means we are done with all our agenda items, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.